Isaac is the chosen one, not Ishmael. Now, don't just believe what I said because I just said it, but believe it because Scripture did. And I will show you. Thank you to this brother here for his comment, as that is what inspired this video. And I appreciate comments like this because it highlights that sometimes there is a misunderstanding, or in some cases, a lack of context. So hopefully today, whether you're a Christian, whether you're a Muslim, or just randomly popping on here, I hope you learn something new and can see how Isaac is the chosen one. Now, I have written up a response to this brother, and that is what I'm sharing with you today, with scripture, etc., as I want to highlight these key points where people get misguided. So, without further ado, let's go. I'm reading it here on my phone, so if I look down, that's why. First of all, not just to this brother, but to anyone, hello. And thank you for your comments. You know, whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying, I do really appreciate hearing from you guys, and I like learning, so it's always beneficial. Now, first of all, the research done in this video was by reading the Torah and the Bible, as well as researching and understanding the original Hebrew. Now, this is important because with any language, if you're going to read the Quran, if you're going to read the Bible, you know, the Hebrew and Greek, with anything really, you want to understand it in its natural, original language. And that helped format the last video. If you don't know what I'm talking about, the link will be up somewhere on the screen around here or down in the description box. That's the kind of prequel to this response. Now, just because, and I feel like this needs to be said in general for a lot of things, whether someone wants kosher meals instead of halal meals, they want meat that hasn't been prayed of in Allah's name, or, you know, whether there is a scripture or anything, right? Just because people disagree with the Islamic claims or Islamic ideologies and way of life does not make anyone Islamophobic. Like, oh, Islam, I'm scared of. No. We're just, you know, if anything, this brother's claim by anyone who does actually make this case is saying both scriptures, the Torah and the Bible, are Islamophobes or Islamophobic. Despite Islam not being mentioned once in the Bible history lesson before that I was teaching to Christians, and somehow it was Islamophobe. Anyhow, that's what I just wanted to say on that. Nevertheless, I digress. Radio. So again, no matter the topic, right? Context always matters. So let's start with the earliest scripture this brother mentioned. Genesis 16:3. Abram took Hagar as a wife. Correct. He did. Yeah. And I know you said, well, a lot of Christians don't believe that. Well, it's in our scripture, so if they don't, then they need to go read it. Likewise with Jews, they need to go read it and be like, oh yeah. But I agree. No problems there. So, first and foremost, the Hebrew word for wife is isha. Forgive me for my butchering. Isha. This in terms for Hagar is granting the status of a secondary or lesser wife. Okay? But if Abram was Sarah, because they're not Abraham and Sarah, then why make Hagar his second and lesser wife? Well, the cultural practice in ancient Near East at that time was that a barren wife, Sarah, was to provide a maidservant, mistress, Hagar, to her husband, Abram, so that any children born could be legally adopted and claimed as her, Sarah, in this case, own. Now, on to Genesis 17:7-8. I 100%, brother, and anyone who also contests this, I 100% agree with you. Ishmael was mentioned and part of a covenant. I'll say that again. I 100% agree with you. Ishmael was mentioned and a part of a covenant. A, not the. A. Again, this is where context is really important because this is specific. Oh, my words. The specific covenant, God, Yod-Heh-Vav-Heh, Yahweh. And if you don't know that, that is God's name he revealed. And it also mentioned later in scripture when people asked Jesus who he was. He said, I am that before Abraham was, I am, and I am as Yahweh. Anywho, I digress. This is where context is really important, because the specific covenant God is talking to Abram about from just 4 verses earlier. So I know you gave me a verse in Genesis 17:7, but just 4 verses earlier, this is when Abram's name is changed to Abraham, father of nations. Genesis 17:3-6. That's the same covenant Sarah is part of. It's important. How do we know this is so, though? Like, I can't just make that claim and be like, Sarai is part of that covenant. Well, not only did Abram become Abraham, father of nations, his first yet barren wife, Sarah, became Sarah, mother of many nations. Abraham recognized this unbelievable gift of a son through Sarah, hence him laughing, when God had said, which we know is what Isaac's name means, and this was in Genesis 17:17. But wait, there's more. Abraham says to God, just 1 verse later, right? If only Ishmael might live under your blessing. See, God has not forgotten Ishmael. Okay, and brother, and to anyone, this is so important. This is the most important part. Okay, I want warning lights. This is the most important part. If you're not getting it, if you're not listening to anything else, listen to this. Okay, 1 verse later, right? We're just at Genesis 17:17. Genesis 17:18. Then God said, yes, but your wife Sarah will bear a son, and you will call him Isaac. I will establish my covenant with his as an everlasting covenant for his descendants after him. And as for Ishmael, I have heard you. I will surely bless him. I will make him fruitful, and he will greatly increase his numbers. He will be the father of 12 rulers, and I will make him into a great nation. But my covenant, again, out of the scripture, this is God speaking, but my covenant I will establish with Isaac, whom Sarah will bear to you by this time next year. Okay? Again, that is what God was saying. Yes, I will bless Ishmael. I'll make him, a father of 12 rulers. Make him into a great nation. Right? No doubt about it. I 100% agree that's what scripture says. I have no reason to doubt it because that's what it says. However, his everlasting covenant is yes through Abraham's seed. Which one? Isaac. This is God saying it to Abraham. Not a random person, not a nomad, God. Last scripture. You mentioned Genesis 21:13. I have no need to copy it here, but I'll still bring it up here somewhere. But yes, it does talk about God's covenant with Abram regarding Ishmael, the son of a slave, into a nation because he is Abram's offspring. Again, that is the covenant God made to Abraham in relation to Ishmael. One more time, God's covenant with Abraham regarding Ishmael will be that he will be a great nation, the father of 12 rulers, because he is Abram's offspring. Okay? But, and we're wrapping it up, my dear friends. Context, okay? Again, context. If you're going to bring scripture, bring context too. Okay? It's so important. And look, I understand. If you actually didn't know, that's okay. Just don't harden your hearts when you're hearing this. Don't be like, I'm not saying you have to believe this. I'm not saying, hey, convert to Christianity. I'm not saying any of that. I'm just saying if you're going to use scripture, especially our scripture, in Jewish scripture, right? Don't take it out of context. And if I then teach you and show you, don't harden your hearts. Just because you disagree with it doesn't mean it's not true. Facts over feelings, am I right? Anywho, again, context. One verse earlier, we see that God says to Abraham that it is through Isaac that his offspring will be reckoned, named. Again, this means it is not children of the flesh, work-based, impatient. We're talking Abraham, or at that moment, Abram, Sarah. I want a child. We want a child. You know, God made a promise to you. I'm impatient. Let's do it ourselves. Let's do it. You know, God made a promise with you. Let's just do it this way. So they have a child this way, but guess what? That's not the promise. That's not the child of the promise. Are you seeing what I'm saying? Man did work in order to get product. God said, no. That is not my promise to you. I made a promise to you. And that promise, that offspring of the promise, that is where the covenant, the everlasting covenant will be. Okay, so that's what I mean by, again, this means it is not children of the flesh, work-based, impatient, who are children of God, but the children of the promise, the everlasting covenant God made with Abram back in Genesis 15:4-5. Later explicitly confirmed by God himself to Abraham that the promised son is Isaac in Genesis 17:19 are counted as his offspring. So again, my dear brother, as well, my dear sisters, and anyone else who's like just watching this for funsies, God bless you all. In Genesis 17:19, God explicitly confirms that Isaac is the promised son, in whom his everlasting covenant will continue with. And if you haven't understood it by now, what I'm trying to say is that Ishmael is not the chosen one. He is not the promised son in which the everlasting covenant goes through. That is Isaac. So I hope you guys really enjoyed this video. I actually thoroughly enjoyed learning about it, as always. So I'd like to hear your thoughts and comments as well. Much love and God bless.